Hello all. This is Leola Angel, writer of Vault Veritas. Before we dive into today's episode, I just wanted to give you a quick content warning. This episode touches on some heavy topics, including anxiety, panic attacks, and imposter syndrome. If you'd prefer to skip this one, that's completely okay. You won't miss anything critical to the plot, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. Research has shown that anxiety has been on the rise for the past few years, and it can significantly impact people's lives. If you or someone you know is dealing with these challenges, I encourage you to reach out to a qualified professional for support. You are not alone, and you deserve support.
Vault Veritas SCP Files. Episode 25 Imposter. Incident Report 3647-2. Second incident involving SCP-3647, colloquially known as Quousque Tandem. Incident under active investigation as of report date. Object Class: Safe. Risk Assessment Level: Low. Reported by Dr. Astrid Bergman, Senior Researcher. Report made November 10th, 2019. You say to write. Well, I'm not any good at that. Just look at any of my research papers and you'll understand. I've tried so hard. Please don't make me read this out loud. That isn't the next step, is it? Don't anybody read this, actually. My heart is pounding out of my chest just holding the pen, and I doubt the shaking of my hands makes it any more legible. Now that I've looked back on what I've written, it's all rubbish so far. But I only have so much paper to write what happened, and if I try to erase all this, you'll know. I'd only be turning in a giant smudge stain, and what would you think of me then? I know that this is, in part, SCP-3647's fault. I know enough about that hairpin to feel it intensifying my pre-existing anxiety, making it so much harder to think about what I'm writing instead of how I'm writing it. It's just so hard to fit in here. When I first came to the Foundation, bright-eyed, with a new parapsychology doctorate in hand, I had no idea how hard it would be to fit in. I thought my academics had prepared me well for the job, but in reality, the knowledge and education are only half of the battle. The researchers here, the ones that are successful, they all have this attitude, this aura of pure, cold calculation and unflappable logic. I was never any good at that, at putting on that professional veneer. I always find myself tripping over my words. I'll start a sentence and have no idea where it's supposed to go or how to end it. It's not that I don't know my topic and my field. I do. I swear I do. It's just that I've never had to talk about what I'm doing like this before. I never learned how to make it compelling and digestible for others. And when you're trying to speak in that way to other researchers, people who you know have enough knowledge to fully understand all the mistakes you're making, and can judge exactly how you're phrasing everything. God, it's absolutely terrifying. It just leaves you questioning, am I in the right field? Am I actually a so-called expert, or am I just pretending? I'm supposed to be this specialist, approaching all these anomalies with the air of calm rationality. But can I be truthful? Some of the SCPs we've studied, they scare the hell out of me. Some of what I've heard has made my blood run cold, and my mind stick to the stories I hear long after I've left work for the day. I know I'm supposed to be objective, to not let it get to me. But how can I when I'm staring down death and evil? I don't belong here. I'm not like the others. People call me doctor. They treat me with respect. They listen to what I have to say. They value my opinion. And I just mentally scream at them that I don't know what I'm doing. I tried, you know. For the first 2 years, I was simply an extra mind for data analysis and hypothesis testing. But even still, I knew I didn't fit in. We'd order a D-class to a gruesome fate, and then just sit back and watch. My fellow researchers would see the prisoner suffer and peacefully write notes and make even-toned comments. I, on the other hand, would be standing there sweating, all muscles tensed, wanting desperately to intervene and to put an end to the misery. My notes were always shaky, my voice always cracking. It wasn't right. People must have noticed. So I started talking less and typing more, trying desperately to hide. SCP-3647 ended the charade. When I was told about the promotion to senior researcher, that I would be leading my own set of studies into newly discovered anomalies, I knew it wouldn't end well. I wasn't qualified enough. But I stayed. If I backed out, all the struggling, all the hard work, it all would have been worth nothing. And I was so convinced 3647 was harmless. SCP-3647 is an ancient Roman golden hairpin. It is an ornate, twisting laurel leaf adorned with inlaid pearl. It's absolutely beautiful on its own, but when it rests in its intricate ivory box, it's one of the most breathtaking accessories I have ever seen. When I was first presented with it, I was so incredibly relieved. An inanimate object, lacking even the ability to compel us. The containment procedure had written itself. Stick it in a box, and tuck it away forever. All that I really needed to do was test and confirm its properties. The only thing we knew about it was that when our field archaeologist had accidentally pricked his finger on the pin during retrieval, he had begun acting very strangely. He'd immediately started to stutter, dropping his eyes away from the gaze of his peers, and made an excuse to separate himself, running to the nearby car to regain composure. When he didn't come out for several hours, citing nerves, the Foundation knew we'd uncovered an SCP. I only did one test on it. Just one. I know that's unusual. I know I didn't handle it well. I know. You don't need to tell me. Seeing what I did to that man. It was 3 weeks ago. We'd just gotten the pin in, and I had been given total autonomy on the testing, full control over every aspect, from the methodology to the location to the D-class selection. It was the smallest, gentlest anomaly they could have started me with, but it was still so overwhelming. In my head, I kept mulling over the test, running through each part over and over. I knew this was it. Time to prove I really did belong here. That I'd earned my title and my station. That I really was an expert. I didn't stop to think about the tester. About what we were going to do to him. D71243. I don't even remember his real name. He was a former classicist, skilled in rhetoric, someone who could recite an epic in front of an audience and only feel confidence. But despite his cultured nature, he wasn't a snob. I interviewed him prior to the test, and he was actually quite pleasant, very respectful. He spoke eloquently at length about his passion for Roman and Greek literature, and even recited a translated passage from the Iliad without skipping a beat. I was so impressed that I, in turn, forgot to even seek his expertise on the hairpin, see if he could tell me anything about its origins or if it had ever appeared in any literature he was familiar with. I don't think I wanted to see him as a peer, someone with as much, if not more, useful knowledge than I had. No. Something in me knew that I had to see him as a test subject. For the test, I had him read an excerpt from Roman orator Marcus Tullius Cicero's Catiline Orations in front of a small gathered audience. As he read it, flawlessly and with a perfect and clear cadence, I motioned for an agent to puncture the skin on the back of his neck with the pin. I wasn't trying to actually hurt him, it was just a tiny cut, less than a centimeter. D71243 was startled, of course, but dutifully kept on reading. Until he started to stutter. His once confident tone faltered, and he started shaking and quivering. In a small voice, almost imperceptible to those of us in the crowd, he asked if he could stop the speech. I couldn't exactly say yes. The test wasn't over, and there were so many people watching my movements and judging me. I gestured for him to continue and watched, passively, as he started to clutch his chest and gasp for breath. He sobbed, huge full-body spasms, and pleaded with me over and over to just let him go. I shook my head, the heavy guilt preventing me from speaking. And then his eyes met mine. There was a deep desperation, a frantic look of pure terror that pierced my very soul. He turned to the guards, his hands a clawing blur, and he tried his best to flee through them to the door, scrabbling like an injured animal. It was a mercy to order him sedated. I tried to write up the study, but all those tiny, painstaking details eluded me. Those panicked eyes flooded my mind every time I sat down in front of my computer. I started to track his status. I ordered him to therapy. No progress. I ordered him to be placed on anxiolytics. No progress. Nothing could touch the anxiety, and it consumed him. He couldn't leave his cell without shaking. He couldn't talk without stuttering. He jumped at every small sound, shied away from every new person. And it was all my fault. I really tried to be impartial, to bite down on the guilt and fear that had settled into a cold rock in my stomach. I knew I was supposed to just let it go, write it up in logical, objective language, and calmly order another round of testing. But every time I tried to push away the memory of those eyes, the knot in my stomach only tightened. I couldn't eat for the nausea. I could barely sleep. I knew I had to see him again. As I approached his room, I could feel his fear radiating through the door before I even stepped inside. He was a pale slip of himself, curled up on his bunk. I didn't think it possible, but somehow he managed to recoil into himself even further at my entrance, pressing his body against the wall, his alarmed eyes locked on my approach. Please don't hurt me again, he pleaded. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt me. I felt the guilt stab through my heart, two-pronged. I had caused this, and I was feeling remorse when I wasn't supposed to. For weeks, I hadn't been sure which weight was worse, but seeing him like this, it wasn't even close. "I'm not here to hurt you," I tried to reassure him. "I just want to talk." But he couldn't hear me. He was rocking back and forth, his arms wrapped around his legs, trying to ground himself in some small way. I took a step towards him, reaching out my hand to comfort, searching for his shoulder in some small gesture of peace. But he only saw an attack. In a swift movement, he lunged towards me. I saw the glint of gold in the dim light of the cell. And then I felt SCP-3647 slice into my outstretched palm. It was just a tiny cut, just the slightest graze. A single drop of blood welled up from my skin, and the SCP clattered to the floor. I barely registered what was happening as D71243 pushed past me and fled into the hall. It was all such a blur. Why was it in his room? How had he gotten it? Had I really been so incompetent that I hadn't kept track of it and just let it be swiped from under my nose? I don't know how long I sat there in that empty cell, the panic rising inside me as I realized that I would never truly be a researcher, that all of my life had been wasted, that I couldn't do one simple thing right, like interview a test subject or secure an SCP. I couldn't stay objective. I couldn't keep my boundaries. And now I'd thrown away every chance I ever had. Time seemed to slow, every second weighing down on me. I couldn't move. It was so hard to breathe through the tightness and pressure. I clawed at my chest, trying desperately to gasp for air, but I knew in that moment that I was dying. The world around me blurred, my hands tingled and ached, and I knew that death was coming. I didn't die, though, as I'm sure you've guessed. When I regained myself, I was here, in this room, with this paper and the order to write. This is the real end. I don't know what happens next, but I know I will never be free of this mistake. Wherever I go from here, everyone will know. Everyone will judge me. I may be alone, but I know what they must be saying about me behind these walls. What they must be thinking. I can feel them watching me through the cameras, and I'm so completely, utterly terrified of what they're going to do next. Astrid is still alive, which I almost thought was wonderful news. I wanted to meet her and talk about her experience as a researcher. However, Judging by the reports, it would not be wise for me to seek her out. Unlike normal social anxiety and imposter syndrome, the anxiety inflicted by SCP-3647 is impervious to treatment. Astrid chose instead to give up her attempts at research and seek an isolated and reclusive lifestyle. There is little more information about her. SCP-3647 is stored in a standard locker at Site-77. It has not been touched or tested since this incident, making this whole debacle truly the epitome of pointless testing. The investigation into how D71243 obtained the pin in the first place is still officially open. It seems nobody cared enough to actually follow up on it properly. It was deemed that he most likely nabbed it after testing in an effort to destroy it, and was easily able to take it due to what they cite as Dr. Astrid's incompetence. How the Foundation truly values competence and efficiency above all else. Well, Miranda, I am striving to meet both labels. I'm sure you were happy to hear me turn down time with Niall in order to continue my recordings. No matter how sick they are making me feel, God, I could practically feel Astrid's anxiety. The pounding, aching, gnawing anxiety that... never mind. Anyway, as I was saying, I'm being dutiful and keeping on top of my responsibilities, not letting Niall distract me. Not that it's a great idea to have him just off doing his own thing, I suppose. We all know how well that turned out last time. Truly, though, he's been out for all of a few days. What other trouble could he possibly have gotten himself into already?
Vault Veritas SCP Files is a podcast inspired by the SCP Foundation. Imposter is based on SCP-3647 by Owain Lupton from the SCP Wiki located at scpwiki.com/SCP-3647. It is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 unported license. This episode featured Justin Gellner as Scott Anderson and D.R. Thompson as Niall Connors. It was written and edited by Leola Angel. We welcome comments. Please rate and review us. Email us at vaultveritas@gmail.com. Join our Discord channel using the link in the episode description. Tweet us at Vault Veritas. Or for additional content, visit our Patreon. Thanks for listening.